Hello, lords and ladies. Today we're going to talk about the Renaissance, AD 1300 to about 1600. We have several objectives that I want you to be able to explain or answer, at least achieve, right, before we're done today. So we want to be able to discuss the impact of capitalism on the Renaissance, what capitalism is, okay, compare and contrast the Renaissance period with the medieval period, so you should be able to look at what the Renaissance period is having, and then think back to what we talked about in the medieval period and see how they're alike or different. We also need you to be able to analyze the impact of the printing press on the spread of Renaissance ideas, which should be relatively straightforward once we start talking about it. So capitalism, we have to talk about what it is. You have to be able to explain to me how it impacts the Renaissance. The Middle Ages at the end with the bubonic plague and all of that, and after that, you saw a tremendous resurgence in trade, and you saw trade and towns and all of these things growing. And the area of the world where they seem to grow the most is Italy. Italy is located centrally on the Mediterranean Sea, and it controlled most of the trade that is going to occur in this time frame. So capitalism is an economic system, and capitalism is based on private ownership of the means of production, meaning private ownership of the factories or the printing shops or anything that is used to produce goods, and that stuff is owned privately, and then the profits are kept privately as well. So it's based on supply and demand. If someone sees a demand for something, then they create it. So capitalism is an economic system. It leads this commercial revolution that we look at in this period, where commerce, business, trade, all of these things are increasing exponentially. And because of the Crusades is really when we start to see it. We talked about that contact between Europe and the Middle East and Asia further along. So the growth of large, wealthy city-states in Italy, because of this capitalist explosion where trade is going and going and going, makes Italy the logical place where the Renaissance will begin. So what you see happen in this period in Italy, and then it's going to spread other places throughout Europe, is you see a newfound respect for the ancient Greek and Roman traditions, learning being stressed. There's a questioning spirit that's going throughout Europe. And a part of that is due, in fact, to, the Crusades and the Black Death and starting to look at the church a little bit differently. Also looking at the ancient Greek and Roman learning and saying, wow, some of these things counteract or contradict what we've been talking about and how we've been living our lives. So looking at their traditions starts to make people question things that they have believed in. So capitalism, money flowing freely through, people being able to get wealthy, these things combined with the resurgence of the Greek and Roman traditions create this questioning spirit. So people are questioning everything in the Renaissance, and so that leads to tremendous amount of innovations. Capitalism is going to fund people a massive way to get themselves rich, and this commercial revolution then leads to people having free time where they start looking at the ancient Greek and Roman traditions again. The other thing that capitalism allows is it allows the merchants, the guys who are making tons of money on trade, to free up some of their money and put it into artistic endeavors. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. But these wealthy men now can take their money and commission an artist to create a painting for them, or to create a statue for them, or to create their home, all of these things that are supportive of the artist community. The other thing about this questioning spirit that's running throughout this Renaissance, and that will continue on as we're talking through, is this increased desire for knowledge, that they want to know more. They want to know more about science and technology and how these things work. How do people get sick? It's not just because God is frustrated with us or we've done something to offend him. So you do start to see that questioning spirit move its way into science and technology. So what happens with this questioning spirit in the Renaissance is that it then carries over, and we're going to see it in the scientific rev and the Enlightenment. So this is really just the very beginning of this, the Renaissance. And the other fact is they want to beautify their cities. They want to create new and more beautiful structures and statues and anything to make it more aesthetically pleasing. Now the next thing we want to look at is during the Renaissance, what are the ideas that we're going to see come out of this? So Renaissance, the word itself means rebirth, rebirth of culture, and it's again inspired by this questioning spirit that's taking Europe by storm. People start to renew their ideas about human reason, that humans can reason things out and that they are bright and that that is worthy and worthwhile. That leads to this new philosophy called humanism. It's an intellectual movement, and it focuses on individual achievement instead of focusing on, the church thoughts of society and doing well for everyone and that kind of thing, and focusing your entire life on God and what the pursuit of spirituality will mean for you. You need to now focus on more worldly subjects. Secular means worldly, meaning not religious, not connected to religion in any way. And so that's a huge and fundamental shift in the way that people are thinking. Because prior to this, in the Middle Ages, remember, they are thinking entirely in terms of religion. Religion is what held them together, what gave them some security and stability in a time of incredible uncertainty and panic and chaos. So this is a major shift. Thinking that individuals matter and that individual achievement is important and that everyone is capable of it, these are very radical ideas considering where we were in terms of the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, you're a serf, you stay a serf, you die a serf. Now you're seeing tremendous shift in what people can do and how their achievements are valued, if in fact they are. So humanism is a cornerstone of the Renaissance, and it really starts to show that people believe in human reason again and human achievement, and that these things are important. And that goes back to a lot of what the ancient Greeks believed. So you see again that Greco-Roman tradition coming through in the Renaissance. Take a look. This is a picture that is Leonardo da Vinci, but it's symbolic of secularism. So secular ideas start to become important in the Renaissance period. So we have some secular writers, and the one I want to focus on, secular again meaning non-religious, worldly, he writes on world manners, doesn't focus on religious themes, is Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli wrote a piece called The Prince. The Prince is relatively short. When you go to college, you will read it. It is basically a how-to manual for a king or for a leader, any kind of government official. And what he tells in this piece is that two ideas. The ends justify the means, which means, hopefully you know this already, but if you don't, the ends justify the means. So your goals, if you achieve them, it's justifying however you seek to do it. So the idea is you do whatever you have to get what you want. The ends justify the means. If your goal is met, whatever you had to do to get it doesn't matter. The other thing he says to the kings is that it's better to be feared than to be loved. So you want to put the people in fear of you rather than to have them respect and love you, because that way they might take advantage of you or challenge you. So it's better to be feared than loved, and the ends justify the means. So he's pretty much advocating that the rulers be pretty ruthless. And that's what we're going to see carry us through this Renaissance period. In terms of science, this is the first time that we're going to see the Earth being posited as not being the center of the universe in Europe. This had been posited in other areas of the world, but in Europe this is a very new idea, and it very much challenges the beliefs of the Church. You have Nicholas Copernicus, who is the first to really say this, but he doesn't put it out there as vocally as does Galileo Galilei. So Galileo said the Earth orbits the sun, and he said it very clearly and loudly, and the Church was very frustrated with him and sought to shut him up, essentially. They put him on trial. He was arrested. He was forced to renounce his beliefs publicly, which he did. He did say, no, I don't believe that, and I agree with whatever the Church says. So he did actually end up renouncing his faith and these beliefs that he had about the Earth orbiting the sun publicly, and was still put under house arrest and lived that way for the rest of his life because of it. So the church still did wield a tremendous amount of influence, but people are starting to question, and they are starting to look at science as a means of finding things out rather than just accepting everything that the church is saying. So Galileo, though he did end up under house arrest for the rest of his life, his ideas did make a difference. This is Nicholas Copernicus, and the next one that you'll see is Galileo Galilei, who spent, again, the rest of his life in house arrest. Renaissance art is going to shift tremendously as well. We're going to see religious themes become a thing of the past. Art now is going to depict natural subjects. You're going to have paintings of people and figures and scenes from nature instead of religious Bible stories and mosaics of church leaders and things like that. Part of the reason for this is because you have these patrons of the arts. Remember we said all of these merchants have a ton of money that they're now going to use to buy art because they've bought everything else that they need, and now let's beautify our homes and beautify our cities and our lives. And the most important patron of the art is the Medici family. You can hear it say Medici too. Say it either way. But the Medici are very wealthy and influential as a family in this period, and they put a tremendous amount of money into the arts, commissioning artists like Michelangelo and some of the more famous artists of the time period. So when you're looking at the Medicis, and this is Lorenzo Medici, they are instrumental in creating and propagating all of this art that we see in the Renaissance period. What is this art going to look like? They have many different styles and techniques that are going to emerge here. We know that the shift is going to be from the realistic to the more real, or from the more religious to the more realistic theme. So more pictures of people and figures and drawings such as those. They also are going for a 3D perspective, so to try to print and paint in the 3D perspective as opposed to something flat looking and no movement and that kind of thing. Architecture is then going to also reflect that Greek and Roman influence. If they're going back to the ideas of the Greeks and the Romans, certainly architecture would be one area where they would admire the achievements. So you're going to see buildings that are built with more columns, that have the arches and the domes and the things that we saw from Greece and Rome. So coming into this period, those new structures are going to reflect the Greek and Roman influence. This will kind of replace what we saw with the Romanesque and the Gothic architecture of the Middle Ages. So looking at architecture shifting, Greek and Roman influence, you can see it through many of the most famed buildings throughout Europe. Now, several of the artists that are associated with this period, you probably know. Most of you know these guys as Ninja Turtles, alright? And yes, they are Ninja Turtles, but they're also Renaissance artists. The one that I'm sure you guys are familiar with is Leonardo da Vinci. Da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa, which I'll show you guys. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you're familiar with it. He also had some very interesting ideas, had plans drawn for a very primitive helicopter, all kinds of interesting tanks, you know, things like that, things that were way ahead of his time. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, and I'll show you a view of that. And then you have Raphael, who is, you know, a good artist as well. So they're not just Ninja Turtles, guys. They are also medieval artists. Okay, so here we have Leonardo da Vinci and his Mona Lisa. Next up is going to be Michelangelo, who again commissioned by the Medici. When you look at his paintings in the Sistine Chapel, Sistine like S-I-S-T-I-N-E, he had to work on a scaffold for like years straight painting that stuff straight up. So very, very intricate work. Those artists were incredible. How do all these new ideas in the Renaissance start to spread? How do people become aware of these new art forms and the new everything? This is largely due to an invention by Johann Gutenberg, the printing press. The printing press, now keep in mind, movable type printing was actually developed in China much earlier. But in Europe, this is the first time that we're really seeing it. And you'll hear people debate whether or not it was really Gutenberg who founded it, but he is the one credited. So we look at him. Movable type makes it easier to produce a book. In this time frame, if you were going to make a copy of the Bible and you wanted to get one, it would literally take a full year for someone to handwrite and transcribe that Bible. So this is a tremendous impact because books are now going to be more available, and that means that new ideas are more accessible to more people. That is going to make a huge difference. This printing press is not only going to help Renaissance ideas spread, but when we get into the Protestant Reformation, which is coming shortly in here, it falls within the Renaissance period, you're going to see that this printing press also makes a huge impact in terms of getting those ideas out as well. So movable type makes production of these books faster, easier, but it also, more importantly, allows cultural diffusion and the spread of ideas. Those things are going to be great for the people, somewhat dangerous for the rulers as we go through time. So keep this in mind. But this all starts during the Renaissance period. So now they can print books faster, easier, and they are cheaper, more accessible to the poorest people. More and more people are going to start to become literate, and that kind of thing starts to really happen in the Renaissance. So this period, tremendously important in terms of the spread of ideas. Here's a picture of the printing press, right, as depicted by Bruce Koslanek. This is from a book cover, and so just to show you what it looked like. Other philosophers and writers of the Renaissance period, Christian humanism, you have Erasmus. So basically, he's trying to meld the idea of individual achievement with the faith and kind of meld the two together, kind of like Sir Thomas Aquinas that we talked about earlier. Utopia, Sir Thomas Murray. The idea of a utopia is that it's an ideal society, the perfect place, the best of all possible worlds. And in this period, you also have William Shakespeare, who I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. You've probably already read Romeo and Juliet, and possibly some others. This man has written more famous plays than just about anybody in history. His works are still in print. People marvel at the way he can, just weave words together and all of the historical references there in his works. Tremendous, tremendous body of work that, again, still influential to this day. Right here we have Sir Thomas Murray, little picture of him, and there's good old William Shakespeare. So I know this one's longer. Tremendous amount of impact of the Renaissance period on art, literature, architecture, philosophy, all kinds of learning and thinking going on here. And with that, we're going to pause for tonight. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon.